The lights in the control room flashed blue and green as Commander Jamin looked at the big screen in front of him. Numbers and charts filled the display, showing the power levels of every known species in the galaxy. He had been studying these numbers for years, and they never failed to amaze him. The Galactic Council had created something called the Power Quantification System, PQs for short. It was like a report card for entire species, giving each one a number from 1 to 10. The higher the number, the stronger the species. It was that simple. J-Min touched the screen and scrolled through the list. The Valkyrie Empire sat at the top. With a score of 9.8, they were tall, crystal-like beings who lived for 1,000 years. Their minds could connect directly to computers, making them incredibly smart. Their ships were fast, their weapons were powerful, and their armies never lost a battle. Below them were the Threnody with an 8.6 rating. They had 4 arms and could see in 10 different types of light. Their technology was so advanced that they could build entire cities in space. Next came the Altarians, Jamin's own people, with a solid 7.3. Not bad, but not great either. The PQs measured everything that mattered in war and peace. How many ships did you have? How strong were your weapons? How smart were your people? How long did they live? Could they read minds or move things with their thoughts? Did they work well together? Or did they fight each other all the time? The system had been perfect for 3,000 years. Every species that joined the Galactic Council was measured, ranked, and given jobs based on their scores. High-scoring species became leaders and generals. Low-scoring species did simple work like mining or farming. Dr. Haijin walked into the control room carrying a datapad. She was the Council's best expert on alien life forms. Her job was to study new species and figure out where they belonged in the galaxy. "Commander, we have a new species to add to the database," she said, setting the pad down on the desk. J-Min looked up from the screen. "Another one. That's the 3rd this month." "Where are they from? The Outer Rim? Small planet called Earth?" "They call themselves humans." Haijin pulled up the information on the main screen. "I finished the basic tests and measurements." The data appeared on the screen, and Jamin frowned. The numbers were not good. Not good at all. Military strength. 1.8 out of 10, he read aloud. They still use weapons that throw small metal pieces. No energy weapons. No plasma cannons. Just ... Bullets. That's right, Haijin said. Their most advanced ships barely travel faster than light. Most of their military still uses vehicles that roll on wheels. They haven't even figured out how to make their soldiers stronger or faster. Jamin shook his head. Technology level, 2.2 out of 10. They're still burning fossil fuels on their home planet. Their computers are huge and slow. They can't even control the weather. It gets worse, Haijin said. Mental abilities, 0.8 out of 10. They can't read minds. They can't move objects with their thoughts. Can't even speak to each other without using their mouths. Lifespan factor, 1.5 out of 10. Jamin continued reading. They only live for about 80 years. That's barely enough time to learn anything useful. And their social stability is the worst part, Haijin added. They're constantly fighting each other. Wars, arguments, competition. They can't seem to work together for more than a few years at a time. The final score appeared at the bottom of the screen, 2.1 out of 10. Jamin leaned back in his chair. 2.1. That's one of the lowest scores we've ever recorded. The only species lower than that are the blob creatures from Epsilon 7, and they don't even have brains. The humans are strange, Haijin said. They're not the weakest species we've found, but they're close. Their bodies are soft and break easily. They need to eat food every few hours or they get weak. They can't survive in space without special suits. What about their culture? Jamin asked. Chaotic Haijin replied. They have hundreds of different languages, thousands of different beliefs, and they can't agree on anything. They fight wars over things like invisible lines on maps or who gets to control certain resources. Jamin studied the data more carefully, but they did figure out space travel. That has to count for something. Barely, Hyjin said. Their ships are held together with welded metal and chemical rockets. It's like watching children play with dangerous toys. I'm surprised they haven't blown themselves up yet. The commander looked at the pictures of humans on the screen. They looked so ordinary. His 2 arms, 2 legs, soft skin, small eyes. Nothing special about them at all. What should we do with them? He asked. Standard procedure for low-level species, Hyjin said. We'll invite them to join the Galactic Council as a Tier 9 member. They can do basic work like mining or cargo transport, nothing important. Will they accept? They always do. New species are usually excited to join the galactic community. Even if they start at the bottom, it's better than being alone in space. Jamin nodded and marked the file as complete. Another species added to the database. 8. Another set of numbers in the system. The PQS had worked perfectly once again. What neither Jamin nor Hyjin knew was that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The PQs could measure ships and weapons and technology. It could count lifespans and calculate mental powers. But it couldn't measure something that humans had in huge amounts. It couldn't measure the stubborn refusal to give up when everything seemed hopeless. It couldn't measure the ability to find solutions that shouldn't work, but somehow did. It couldn't measure what happened when you told a human they weren't good enough. The PQs had quantified power across the stars, but it had completely missed the most dangerous thing about humans. They didn't care what the numbers said. When humans were told something was impossible, they took it as a challenge. And in a galaxy full of species who followed rules and accepted limitations that made humans the most unpredictable force in the universe, the numbers on the screen said 2.1 out of 10. But numbers, as the galaxy would soon learn, didn't tell the whole story. Ambassador Dongwu stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the small blue planet below. Earth looked peaceful from space, with white clouds swirling over green and brown land. It was hard to believe that such a pretty world was home. To a species with such a low PQ's rating, his ship, the Harmony's Edge, was the best the Galactic Council had to offer. It was sleek and white, made from materials that could survive the heat of a star. The engines made no sound as they moved through space, and the weapons could destroy entire mountains with a single shot. Ambassador, we're receiving a transmission. From the humans, said his assistant, a young Threnody named Quan Ho. They want to meet us at their moon. Dongwu nodded. Set course for the meeting point. And remember, we're dealing with a primitive species. Keep things simple. The human ship was already waiting when they arrived. Dongwu had to stop himself from laughing when he saw it. The vessel looked like someone had taken a bunch of metal boxes and welded them together. Black smoke came from the back, and he could see actual windows where the crew was looking out. That's their flagship, Quan Ho asked in disbelief. According to our data, yes, Dongwu replied. Remember they only scored 2.1 on the PQs. This is about what we expected. The human ship moved slowly toward them. Dongwu could hear the engines working hard, making noise that echoed through space. His own ship was silent as it matched their speed. This is Captain Sujin of the Earth vessel Indomitable, came a voice over the radio. Permission to come aboard? Permission granted? Dongwu replied. We'll use our transport beam. Transport beam, Sujin asked. We don't have that technology. Yet we'll use our shuttle. Dongwu watched as a small, boxy craft separated from the human ship. It had tiny engines that left trails of fire behind it. The shuttle moved toward his ship like a flying brick, wobbling slightly as it flew. They're using chemical propulsion, Quan Ho whispered. In space. That's so inefficient. Remember they're primitive, Dongwu said. We need to be patient. Shuttle landed in the docking bay with a loud thud. Dongwu walked down to meet the human delegation, straightening his formal robes. First contact was always an important moment, even with low-rated species. The shuttle door opened with a hiss, and 3 humans stepped out. They were wearing bulky spacesuits that looked heavy and uncomfortable. The one in front removed her helmet, revealing a face with dark hair and determined eyes. Captain Sujin, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for meeting with us. Looked at the extended hand, then remembered that humans used physical contact as a greeting. He shook it carefully, noting how warm and soft human skin was. "Ambassador Dongwu of the Galactic Council," he replied. "Welcome to galactic civilization." He led them to a conference room where the translation devices were set up. The humans looked around with wide eyes, obviously amazed by the technology. Their own equipment looked crude in comparison. "Your ship is incredible," Sujin said. "We've never seen anything like it." "Thank you," Dongwu said. "The Harmony's Edge represents 3,000 years of galactic engineering. Your species shows promise, and we're here to offer you membership in the Galactic Council." Sujin leaned forward. "What would that mean for Earth?" "Well," Dongwu began, pulling up a holographic display based on our evaluation. "Your species would begin as a Tier 9 member. That's the starting level for most new civilizations." "What does Tier 9 mean?" asked one of the other humans, a man with gray hair and pilot's insignia. "It means you would handle support roles," Dongwu explained. "Mining operations, cargo transport, basic construction work. Nothing too dangerous or complicated." Sujin's expression changed. "You're saying we're not good enough for combat roles?" "It's not personal," Dongwu said quickly. "The PQS is scientific. Your species scored 2.1 out of 10. That puts you near the bottom of galactic civilization. You simply don't have the capabilities for serious military engagement." "What capabilities?" Sujin asked. Dong-Wu gestured to the holographic display. "Your weapons are primitive. You use kinetic projectiles instead of energy beams. Your ships are slow and fragile. Your people live short lives and have no psychic abilities. You can't even work together without fighting." The room went quiet. Dongwu noticed that the humans were all looking at each other with strange expressions. He wondered if he had said something wrong. "Let me get this straight," Sujin said slowly. "You're telling us that we're too weak to fight alongside you?" "Not weak," Dongwu corrected. "Just ... unprepared. The galaxy is a dangerous place. There are species out there with ratings of 8 or 9 out of 10. They have weapons that can destroy planets. They have ships that travel through dimensions. Have minds that can control matter itself. You don't think we can handle that?" The pilot asked. "Your highest-rated military equipment scored 1.8 out of 10, Dongwu said. "The Valkyrie Empire's basic soldiers have equipment rated at 7.5. Do you understand the difference?" Sujin stood up slowly. "So what you're saying is, we're good enough to dig rocks out of asteroids, but not good enough to defend ourselves?" "You wouldn't be defending yourselves," Dongwu said. "The Council would protect you. In exchange, you would contribute what you can. Labor, resources, basic services. Like..." "Servant," Sujin said. "Like junior partners," Dongwu corrected. "Every species starts somewhere. The Threnody began as Tier 8 members 2,000 years ago. Now they're Tier 3. Progress is possible." "How long did it take them to move up?" the pilot asked. "About 1,500 years, Dongwu replied. The humans looked at each other again. Dongwu could see they were having some kind of silent conversation. "What if we refuse?" Sujin asked. "Refuse?" Dongwu was confused. "Why would you refuse?" "Membership in the Galactic Council is the greatest honor a species can receive. You would have access to technology beyond your dreams, protection from hostile forces, and a place in the galactic community. But not as equals," Sujin said. "Well, no," Dongwu admitted. "Not immediately, but someday perhaps. ... Sujin's eyes hardened. "Perhaps isn't good enough." "Captain, I think you're misunderstanding," Dongwu said. "This isn't about what you want. This is about what you're capable of. The PQS doesn't lie. Mathematics doesn't have opinions. Your species scored 2.1 out of 10. That's a fact." "Facts can be wrong," Sujin said. Dong-Wu smiled. "The PQS has been accurate for 3,000 years. Q measures every relevant factor: military strength, technology level, mental abilities, social stability, lifespan, adaptability. Your species falls short in every category." "Every category?" Sujin asked. "Every important category," Dongwu confirmed. What the ambassador didn't know was that he had just made a terrible mistake. He had looked at a human being and told them they weren't good enough. He had used numbers and logic and science to prove that humans were weak, but humans had never cared much about what numbers said. They had a long history of ignoring experts who told them something was impossible. They had a habit of proving the experts wrong. "We'll need time to consider your offer," Sujin said. "Of course," Dongwu replied. "Take all the time you need." As the humans left, Dongwu felt satisfied. The meeting had gone well. Soon, Earth would join the Galactic Council as a Tier 9 member. The humans would find their place in the galaxy. What he didn't understand was that he had just challenged the most stubborn species in the universe. And when humans were challenged, they did something that no other species had ever done. They took it personally. 6 months had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Council. The humans had accepted their Tier 9 status, though Captain Sujin had made it clear she wasn't happy about it. Now, human crews were scattered across the galaxy, doing the simple jobs that higher-tier species didn't want to do. Supervisor Kyung-ho stood in the control room of mining station Kepler-4 for 2B. Watching the daily reports come in, the station was built into a large asteroid, deep in space, far from any planets. It was a boring job, but someone had to extract the rare minerals that kept Galactic civilization running. The humans had been assigned to his station 3 months ago. At first, Kyung-ho had been worried. His people, the Threnody, were known for their careful, precise work. Humans were supposed to be chaotic and unpredictable. But the council had given them this assignment, so he had to make it work. "Sir, the morning production numbers are in," said his assistant, a young Threnody named Min-soo. "The humans are at it again." Kyung-ho sighed. "What did they do this time?" "They modified the extraction equipment in Section 7, Min-soo replied. "Again, without permission?" "Again." "How bad is it?" Kyung-ho asked. "Sir, that's the strange. Part production is up 40%. Kyung-ho blinked. 40%? That's impossible. The equipment is already running at maximum efficiency. "That's what I thought, sir. But the numbers don't lie. Whatever the humans did, it's working." Kyung-ho walked down to Section 7, where the human work crews were busy. The corridor was filled with the sound of drilling and machinery. When he reached the extraction site, he stopped and stared. The equipment looked completely different. Had been a simple, straightforward mining setup, was now a complex maze of pipes, wires, and machines. Parts that were never meant to work together had been connected in ways that made no sense. "Bioram," called out to the human engineer who was crawling under one of the machines. "What have you done to my equipment?" Bioram crawled out from under the machine, her face covered in grease and dust. She was a small woman with quick hands and bright eyes. "Oh, hi, boss. We just made a few improvements." "Improvements?" Kyung-ho looked at the mess of wires and pipes. "This looks like a disaster waiting to happen." "It looks messy, but it works," Boram said with a grin. "We redirected the power flow through the secondary cooling system, used the waste heat too, pre-processed the ore, and rigged up a feedback loop that increases drill speed based on mineral density." Kyung-ho's 4 eyes widened. "You can't do that. The cooling system isn't designed to handle power flow. The waste heat will damage the ore, and a feedback loop will cause system oscillations." "Yeah, that's what the manual says," Bioram agreed. "But the manual was written by people who never actually used this equipment. We've been down here for 3 months. We know it actually works. But my computer models show that your modifications should cause catastrophic failure," Kyung-ho insisted. "Your computer models are wrong," Bioram said simply. "Look at the output numbers. We're producing more or with fewer breakdowns, using less power than before." Kyung-ho checked his datapad. The numbers were clear. Section 7 was outperforming every other part of the station. "I don't understand. How is this possible?" "Common sense," Boram said. "And a little bit of creative thinking." Creative thinking. Kyung-ho had heard the term before, but he didn't really understand what it meant. You know, looking at a problem from a different angle, trying things that shouldn't work, just to see if they do, making stuff up as you go along. This was exactly what Kyung-ho had been afraid of. Kyung-ho had been to follow procedures. They didn't stick to the manual. They just ... did things. What if something goes wrong? He asked. Then we'll fix it, Bjorn said. That's what we do. We break things. We learn from them, and we make them better. Kuncho was about to respond when his communication device beeped. It was an emergency signal from the Council's military command. All stations, this is Admiral Taiyang of the Valkyrie Defense Fleet, came the voice. We have a code red situation. The Void Swarm has returned. Kyung-ho felt his blood go cold. The Void Swarm was the stuff of nightmares. They were a species that consumed entire star systems, turning planets into empty husks. They had been gone for 1,000 years, but the old stories were still told. All available fleets are ordered to rendezvous at the Sigma Draconis system immediately. Admiral Taeyong continued. This is not a drill. The Void Swarm is real, and they're heading for the core worlds. The message ended, leaving the mining station in silence. Kyun-ho looked at his datapad, checking the emergency protocols. Mining stations were supposed to shut down and evacuate during code red situations. Boss, what's a Void Swarm? Bjorn asked. Something that shouldn't exist? Kung-ho replied. They're like a virus that infects star systems. They adapt to everything. No one has ever been able to stop them. What's their PQ's rating? Kun-ho checked his database. 8.9 out of 10? They're one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, huh? Boram said. And what's the plan to stop them? The Council is sending every available ship, Kung-ho said. The Valkyrie Empire, the Threnody Fleet, the Altarian Defense Force, everyone with a rating above 7.0. What about Earth? Doc, Kung-ho looked uncomfortable. Earth has a 2.1 rating. They won't be called for this mission. Why not? Because it would be suicide, Kung-ho said. The Void Swarm adapts to any strategy, any weapon, any tactic. Only the most advanced civilizations have any hope of fighting them. Biram was quiet for a moment. So you're telling me that there's a threat to the entire galaxy, and Earth isn't allowed to help because their rating is too low? It's not about being allowed, Kung-ho explained. It's about capability. Human ships are too primitive. Human weapons are too weak. Human tactics are too simple. But what if the advanced civilizations can't stop them? Bjorn asked. Then we all die, Kyuncho said simply. Bjorn looked at the modified mining equipment around them. You know, boss, 3 months ago you told me that our modifications shouldn't work. But they do work. Maybe the problem isn't that human tactics are too simple. Maybe the problem is that everyone else's tactics are too complicated.
What do you...
You mean... maybe sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to ignore what the experts say and just try something different. Kung-ho stared at her. You're not suggesting that humans should join the battle? I'm suggesting that maybe a 2.1 rating doesn't tell the whole story, Bjorn said. Maybe there are things the PQS doesn't measure. Like what? Boram grinned. Like the fact that humans don't know when to give up. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the Void Swarm moved toward the core worlds. Their bioships were massive, dark things that seemed to absorb light itself. They had evolved for one purpose: to consume everything in their path. But they had never encountered a species that didn't care about ratings or rules, or the way things were supposed to work. They had never met humans, and that was about to become a very big problem for creatures that thought they could adapt to anything back on Earth. Captain Sujin stood in the command center, watching the news reports about the Void Swarm. The Galactic Council had not asked for Earth's help. They had not even bothered to inform Earth about the threat. They think we're too weak to matter, she said to her officers. Maybe they're right, one of them replied. Our ships are primitive compared to theirs. Maybe, Sujin said. But I've never been good at accepting what other people think I can't. She turned to her communication officer. Yes. Send a message to all Earth Defense Force vessels. Tell them to prepare for departure. Where are we going, Captain? To prove that the PQS doesn't know everything about humans? The Sigma Draconis system was filled with the most powerful warships in the galaxy. Admiral Taeyong stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crystal Dawn, watching hundreds of vessels arrange themselves into perfect battle formations. The Valkyrie, fleet hung in space like floating diamonds, their crystal hulls reflecting starlight. Each ship was a work of art, designed by computer minds that calculated every angle for maximum efficiency. The weapons were charged with enough energy to crack planets. Near them, the Threnody battle group moved in precise patterns. Their dark ships bristled with advanced sensors that could detect an enemy from light years away. Their crews had 4 arms and could operate weapon systems faster than any other species. The Altarian Defense Force took position on the left flank. Commander Jamin watched his ships form neat rows, their silver hulls gleaming. Every vessel knew exactly where to be, exactly when to fire, exactly how to move. "All fleets report ready, Admiral," came the voice of the communication officer. Admiral Taeyong nodded. The PQs had calculated their chances. With 3 major fleets working together, they had a 73% chance of victory. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than anyone had ever achieved against the Void Swarm. Enemy contacts detected, called the sensor operator. Distance, 2 million kilometers enclosing. On the main screen, dark shapes appeared against the stars. The Void Swarm ships looked like living things, all curves and organic growth. They moved through space like predators, silent and deadly. "All ships prepare for engagement," Admiral Taeyong ordered. "Remember, the enemy adapts quickly. Stick to the battle plan. Do not deviate from your assigned positions." The first wave of Void Swarm bioships came at them fast. The galactic fleets opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams lanced. Through space, plasma cannons roared. Quantum torpedoes streaked toward their targets. Many of the bioships died in the first barrage, their dark holes splitting open like rotten fruit. But the ones that survived began to change. Their armor shifted and grew thicker. Their movement patterns became more erratic. "They're adapting to our weapons," reported the tactical officer. "Expected," Admiral Taeyong said calmly. "Switch." 2 secondary weapon systems. The galactic fleets changed their weapons, using different types of energy and new attack patterns. Again, many bioships died. But again, the survivors adapted, becoming harder to hit and harder to kill. The battle continued for 3 hours. The galactic fleets fought with precision and discipline, following their computer-calculated strategies. But slowly, steadily, the Void Swarm learned to counter every move. "Admiral, we're losing ships faster than we can replace them," reported Commander Jamin from the Altarian fleet. "Maintain formation," Admiral Taeyong ordered. "Trust the strategy." But the strategy wasn't working. The Void Swarm had seen every galactic tactic before. Their bioships adapted to energy weapons, kinetic weapons, plasma weapons, and quantum weapons. They learned to predict movement patterns and counterattack formations. "Sir, unknown ships approaching from the outer system," called the sensor operator. Admiral Taeyong frowned. "Unknown ships? All Council forces are accounted for." On the edge of the sensor display, a small group of vessels appeared. They looked primitive, with blocky hulls and visible exhaust trails. The ships moved in no particular formation, some flying fast, others slow, with no apparent pattern. "Those are human ships," said the tactical officer with surprise. "Human ships?" Admiral Taeyong was confused. They weren't called for this mission. Captain Sujin's voice came over the communication channel. "Galactic Fleet, this is the Earth Defense Force requesting permission to engage. Human vessels maintain distance and observe only," Admiral Taeyong ordered immediately. "This battle is beyond your capabilities. Your PQ's rating is insufficient for combat against a Class 8 threat." "With respect, Admiral, we didn't come." "Here to watch," Sujin replied. "Captain, this is not a debate. Your ships are rated at 2.1. The Void Swarm is rated at 8.9. You will only get your people killed." Sujin was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Admiral, with respect, your 8.9 rated fleets aren't doing so well either." It was true. The galactic forces had lost nearly a third of their ships. The Void Swarm was adapting faster than anyone had predicted. "The situation is under control," Admiral Taeyong said, though he didn't sound convinced. "No, it's not," Sujin said. "You're fighting these things like you're playing chess. Every move is planned, Every strategy is calculated, but chess only works when your opponent follows the same rules. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe it's time to stop playing chess. Before Admiral Tae-young could respond, the human ships broke formation and headed straight for the Void Swarm. But they didn't move like military vessels. They scattered in all directions, some diving under the bioships, others climbing above. A few heading straight through the middle. What are they doing? Asked the tactical officer. I have no idea, Admiral Tae-young admitted. Lieutenant Nara piloted her fighter. Gah! The Seoul Express like she was flying through an asteroid field back home. She twisted and turned, rolled and dove, using every trick she had learned in Earth's chaotic atmosphere. A bioship tried to track her movement. But Nari wasn't following any flight pattern from the military textbooks. She was flying by instinct, making split-second decisions based on whatever felt right at the moment. The bioship's weapons fired where she should have been. But Nari was somewhere else entirely. She fired back with her primitive kinetic weapons. Metal slugs that moved fast but had no guidance systems. The bioship tried to adapt its defenses, but there was nothing to adapt to. The bullets were just chunks of metal flying in straight lines. There was no advanced technology to counter, no complex guidance system to confuse. The slugs punched through the bioship's adaptive armor like it wasn't there. Did you see that? Called another human pilot? Fancy space monster just got killed by a bullet? More human ships joined the attack. They didn't coordinate their movements or follow any grand strategy. Each pilot did whatever seemed like a good idea, which meant the Void Swarm couldn't predict what they would do next. Commander Jamin watched from his ship, amazed. How are they doing this? Their tactics make no sense. That's exactly why it's working, Dr. Hygen said over the communication channel. She had been monitoring the battle from her research vessel. The Void Swarm adapts to logical patterns. But the humans aren't being logical. Engineer Borum had somehow convinced her mining crew to join the fight. They were flying converted cargo ships that had been armed with industrial equipment. One ship was firing mining charges like missiles. Another was using a magnetic crane to grab bioships and smash them into asteroids. This is insane, Admiral Tae-young said, watching a human cargo ship ram into a bioship 3 times its size. This is working, Captain Sujin corrected. She was flying her own ship, the Indomitable, through a formation of bioships that were trying to surround her. Instead of fighting her way out, she flew deeper into their formation, confusing them. Completely, the Void Swarm had never encountered anything like this. Their bioships were designed to adapt to military strategies, weapon systems, and tactical formations. But humans weren't using any of those things. They were using creativity, instinct, and pure, stubborn determination. When their weapons didn't work, they made new ones. When their tactics failed, they tried completely different tactics. When their ships got damaged, they kept fighting anyway. All ships, support the human attack, Admiral Tae-young ordered. For the first time in the battle, he saw a chance for victory. The galactic fleets moved in behind the humans, but they had to change their entire approach. Instead of following rigid battle plans, they tried to copy the human style of fighting. It felt wrong to every trained officer, but it was working. The Void Swarm began to retreat. Their bioships, confused and unable to adapt to the chaotic human tactics, pulled back toward the edge of the system. They're running, someone shouted over the communication channel. They never run, Admiral Tae-young said in amazement. Captain. Sujin's voice came over the radio, slightly out of breath. Admiral, I think we just proved something important. What's that, Captain? Sometimes the best strategy is to have no strategy at all. Admiral Tae-young looked at the tactical display. The most dangerous enemy in galactic history was retreating, defeated by a species with a 2.1 PQS rating. Captain Sujin, he said slowly, I think we need to have a serious talk about how the PQs calculates human capabilities. I think you're right, Admiral. But first, let's make sure these things don't come back. The human ships regrouped, their mismatched hulls scarred but intact. They had just done the impossible, and they were ready to do it again if necessary, because that's what humans did. They ignored the numbers, broke the rules, and found a way to win anyway. The battle wasn't over. The Void Swarm had pulled back to the edge of the system, but they weren't retreating. They were regrouping. Their bioships were changing again. Admiral Tae-young watched his sensors as the enemy formations shifted. "They're adapting to our new tactics," he reported over the communication channel. "Whatever advantage we gained, it won't last long." Captain Sujin looked at her own display from the bridge of the Indomitable. The human fleet had taken heavy damage. Half of their ships were barely holding together, and they were almost out of ammunition. "How long do we have before they attack again?" she asked.
Maybe an hour.
Admiral Tae-young replied. "Maybe less? Then we better make it count," Sujin said. She switched to the human fleet channel. "Are tired. But we're not done yet. Captain, my engines are held." Together with repair tape, called the pilot of the cargo ship New York. "I don't think we can take another round." "My weapons are overheated," reported the Seoul Express. "And I'm down to my last magazine of bullets. Then we'll have to get creative," Sujin said. "Borum, what do you have for us?" Engineer Borum was floating in the cargo bay of her converted mining ship, the Iron Mountain. Around her, her crew was working frantically to turn mining equipment into weapons. "Give me 20 minutes, she said, welding a plasma cutter to the FD-8 side of a cargo container. "I've got an idea that's either brilliant or completely insane." "With humans, those are usually the same thing," Sujin replied. Bioram and her team worked fast. They took cargo containers and filled them with mining explosives. They attached rocket engines salvaged from damaged ships. They rigged up remote controls using parts from communication equipment. "What are you building?" asked Minho, one of her crew members. "Kinetic bombs," Bioram said. "We're going to turn cargo containers into guided missiles. The Void Swarm can adapt to energy weapons. And smart missiles, they can adapt to big chunks of metal, moving really, really fast." Meanwhile, other human crews were making their own preparations. The crew of the Dallas had turned their ship into a giant electromagnet using power cables from 3 other damaged vessels. The Beijing was rigging up a net made from steel cables. Planning to catch bioships like fish, Lieutenant Nari was working on her fighter with a crowbar and some spare parts. "What are you doing to your ship?" asked her mechanic. "It's making it more unpredictable," Nari said. She was removing the flight computer and disconnecting the autopilot. "The bioships are learning to predict our movements, so I'm going to make my ship impossible to predict, even for me." "That sounds dangerous," the mechanic said. "Everything we do is dangerous," Nari replied. "That's why it works." On the galactic ships, the crews watched the humans with amazement and horror. Commander Jamin stood on his bridge, looking at the tactical display showing human ships doing impossible things. "Sir, the humans are removing their targeting computers," reported his weapons officer. "Why would they do that?" Jamin asked. "I think they're planning to aim manually," the officer replied. "Manual targeting against ships moving at those speeds? That's impossible. Sir, with respect, the humans have been doing impossible things." All day, Dr. Hyjin was monitoring everything from her research vessel. She was recording data as fast as she could, trying to understand what made humans so effective. "It's not just their tactics," she said to her assistant. "Every other species in the galaxy tries. To find the best solution, humans try every solution at once and see what works. But that's inefficient," her assistant said. "Inefficient, yes, but also unpredictable. And against an enemy that adapts to patterns, unpredictability is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy." The Void Swarm began moving again. Their bioships had grown new armor and new weapons, advanced in formations that had never been seen before, clearly adapted to counter both galactic and human tactics. "Here they come," Admiral Tae-young announced. "All ships prepare for engagement." But this time, the humans did something that surprised everyone, including themselves. They didn't form up for battle. They didn't coordinate their attack. Instead, each ship did something completely different. Borum launched her cargo container missiles, but not at the bioships. She aimed them at empty space, planning to use their explosions to create debris fields. The Dallas turned on its giant electromagnet and began pulling metal fragments from destroyed ships, creating a swirling cloud of space junk around itself. The Beijing flew straight up, perpendicular to the battle plane, dragging its steel cable net behind it. Lieutenant Nari did something that defied all logic. She turned off her engines and let her fighter drift, firing her weapons randomly in all directions. "What are they doing?" Admiral Tae-young asked, in confusion. "I have no idea," Captain Sujin admitted. "I told them to be creative. I didn't tell them to be this creative." The Void Swarm bioships approached the human positions, ready to adapt to whatever tactics they encountered. But there were no tactics to adapt to. There was only chaos. BRM's cargo containers exploded, filling space, with metal fragments moving at high speed. The bioships tried to avoid the debris, but there was too much of it, moving in too many directions. The Dallas used its electromagnet to fling pieces of wreckage at bioships like a cosmic slingshot. The targets couldn't predict where the next chunk of metal would come from, because the Dallas crew was making it up as they went along. The Beijing's cable net caught a bioship that was trying to adapt to the debris field. The ship struggled to break free, but the more it fought, the more tangled it became. Lieutenant Nari's random firing actually worked. Her bullets, fired with no targeting at all, hit bioships that were trying to predict her attack patterns. Since there was no pattern to predict, they couldn't defend themselves. "This is the most chaotic battle I've ever seen," Commander Jamin said, watching his sensors. "And it's working," Dr. Hijin observed. "The Void Swarm can't adapt to pure randomness." Other human ships joined the chaos. The New York started ramming bioships, not to destroy them, but to push them into the debris fields. The Seoul Express began firing its weapons backwards while flying forward, creating impossible angles of attack. The galactic fleets tried to help, but they had trouble adapting to the human style of fighting. Their crews were trained to follow orders and stick to plans. The humans were making everything up as they went along. "All galactic ships support the human attack," Admiral Tae-young ordered. "But don't try to coordinate with them. Just do whatever seems like it might work." It was the strangest order ever given in galactic military history. Officers who had trained for decades to follow precise protocols were now told to improvise. Some of them couldn't do it, but others discovered they had a talent for creative thinking they never knew existed. The battle turned into a swirling mess of ships, debris, explosions, and weapons fire. There was no formation, no strategy, no plan. Just hundreds of vessels, fighting with pure instinct and determination. And somehow, this was working. The Void Swarm bioships, faced with complete unpredictability, began to make mistakes. They collided with each other, fired on their own forces, and flew into debris fields trying to escape attacks that came from impossible directions. "They're breaking formation," reported the tactical officer. "They're retreating again, Admiral," Tae-young said in amazement. But Captain Sujin wasn't satisfied. "All human ships pursue the enemy. Don't let them regroup." "Captain, we're in no condition to pursue," called the pilot of the Dallas. "Then we'll pursue them anyway," Sujin replied. "That's what humans do." The battered human fleet chased the Void Swarm across the system, continuing to fight with whatever they had left. Some ships were firing flares because they were out of real ammunition. Others were ramming bioships with their hulls already cracked. The sight of tiny, primitive human ships chasing the most feared enemy in the galaxy was something no one would ever forget. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Void Swarm wasn't just retreating. They were running scared. The Sigma Draconis system was quiet for the first time in 18 hours. The Void Swarm had jumped to hyperspace, disappearing into the darkness between stars. They had never retreated from a battle before. They had never run away. But they had just been defeated by a species with the lowest military rating in galactic history. Admiral Tae-young stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display. The numbers didn't make sense. His computer showed that the human fleet should have been destroyed in the first 10 minutes of combat. Instead, they had won a victory that no one thought was possible. "Admiral, incoming transmission from the human," Fleet reported his communication officer. "Put it through," Tae-young said. Captain Sujin appeared on the main screen. Her uniform was torn, her face was covered in smoke and grease, and there was a bandage on her left arm. Behind her, the bridge of the Indomitable was filled with sparks and emergency lights. "Admiral, this is Captain Sujin reporting," she said. "The Void Swarm has been driven from the system. All human vessels are accounted for." "Captain Admiral," Tae-young said slowly, "I need to ask you something. How did you do this? Our models show that you should have been destroyed immediately." Sujin smiled tiredly. "That's the problem with models, Admiral. They only work when everyone follows the same rules. But your ships are primitive. Your weapons are weak. Your tactics are... ... Double quotes. He paused, searching for the right word. "Insane?" Sujin suggested. "I was going to say unconventional." "Same thing," Sujin said. "Admiral, can I ask you something? When you planned this battle, what did your computers tell you to do?" "They calculated the optimal formation, the best weapon combinations, the most efficient attack patterns," Tae-young replied, "and the Void Swarm adapted to all of it, right?" "Yes. They learned from every encounter. That's what makes them so dangerous." Sujin nodded. "But they can only adapt to things that make sense. Our tactics didn't make sense because we made them up as we went along. Can't defend against chaos because chaos has no pattern." Dr. Haijin had been listening to the conversation from her research vessel. She activated her communication. "System Captain Sujin, this is Dr. Hujin. I've been studying your species for months. I need to understand something. How did you know that unpredictable tactics would work?" "We didn't," Sujin admitted. "Just knew that predictable tactics weren't working. So we tried the opposite." "But that's completely illogical," Dr. Haijin said. "Exactly," Sujin replied. "And that's why it worked." Commander Jamin joined the conversation from his ship. "Captain, I've been watching your people for the entire battle. They don't follow orders. They don't stick to plans. They just ... do things." "That's right," Sujin said. "We call it improvisation. When the plan doesn't work, you make a new plan. When that doesn't work, you make another one. You keep trying until something works." "But how do you coordinate without a central plan?" Jamin asked. "We trust each other," Sujin said simply. "Every human knows that when things go wrong, they have to figure it out for themselves. We don't wait for orders. We just act." Admiral Tae-young was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Captain, I owe you an apology. When we first met, I told you that your species was rated 2.1 out of 10. I said you weren't capable of serious military engagement. You were using the best information you had," Sujin said. "Oh, I was wrong. The PQS was wrong. We've been measuring power the wrong way for 3,000 years." Dr. Haijin was already working at her computer, running new calculations. "Admiral, I'm revising the PQ's ratings based on what we observed today. The system needs to account for variables we never considered before." "What kind of variables?" Admiral Tae-young asked. "Creativity, adaptability, the ability to function without central command, the willingness to try solutions that shouldn't work." Dr. Haijin paused. "And most importantly, the refusal to accept defeat." "What's the new human rating?" Commander Jamin asked. Dr. Haijin checked her calculations. 9.9 out of 10. The communication channel went silent. Even Sujin looked surprised. 9.9, Admiral Tae-young repeated. "That puts them above every species in the galaxy except ... "Except no one," Dr. Haijin said. "No species has ever scored above 9.8. The humans just broke the scale." "That's impossible," protested a voice from the Threnody fleet. "Their technology is still primitive. Their ships are still held together with metal welds. They still use kinetic weapons, and those primitive weapons just defeated the most advanced." "Enemy in galactic history," Dr. Haijin replied. "Maybe the problem isn't with human technology. Maybe the problem is with how we define advanced." Engineer Borum's voice came over the channel from her mining ship. "Doc, can I say something?" "Of course," Dr. Haijin replied. "You keep talking about our technology being primitive, but we just turned mining equipment into weapons, cargo containers into missiles, and electromagnets into catapults. Maybe primitive isn't the right word. Maybe the word you're looking for is flexible. Captain Sujin nodded. Borum's right. We don't have the best technology, but we know how to use what we have in ways you never thought of. But how do we measure that?
Doctor?
Hyjin asked. How do we quantify creativity? Maybe you don't, Sujin said. Maybe some things can't be put into numbers. Admiral Taeyong looked at his tactical display one more time. The human ships were scattered across the system, damaged and barely functional, but they had won. They had done the impossible. Captain Sujin, he said formally, on behalf of the Galactic Council. I would like to invite Earth to join the military command structure as a Tier 1 member. Tier 1, Sujin asked. The highest level, you would have command authority over entire fleets. Your people would train our officers. Your tactics would become part of our military doctrine. Sujin was quiet for a moment. Admiral, a few months ago, you told us we were only good enough for mining duty. I was wrong, Admiral Taeyong said. We were all wrong. What changed? Your mind? You did. You showed us that there's more than one way to be strong. We've been measuring power by how well species follow rules. But you showed us that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is break all the rules. Lieutenant Nari's voice came over the channel from her damaged fighter. Captain, does this mean we get better ships now? Sujin laughed. Nari, I don't. Think we need better ships? I think we need to teach the galaxy how to use the ships they already have. Dr. Hyjin was still working on her computer. I'm adding a new category to the PQS. I'm calling it the Wildcard factor. It measures a species' ability to find solutions outside normal parameters. What's humanity's score in that category? Commander Jimen asked. Perfect 10, Dr. Hyjin replied. The first perfect score in PQS history, because we're unpredictable? Sujin asked. Because you're human, Dr. Hyjin said. Because when everyone else sees a wall, you see a door. Because when everyone else says impossible, you say challenge accepted. Because you never learn that some things can't be done. Captain Sujin looked around at her damaged ship, at her tired crew, at the debris field that marked one of the most important battles in galactic history. Admiral, she said, I accept your offer. But we do this our way, your way, Admiral Taeyong asked. No rigid formations. No computer-calculated strategies. No fighting by the book. We teach your people to think for themselves, to adapt, to improvise. We teach them to be human. And in return, you get an army that can't be predicted, can't be countered, and will never ever give up. Admiral Taeyong smiled. Captain, I think that's exactly what the galaxy needs. Years later, when new species joined the Galactic Council, they would learn about the Battle of Sigma Draconis. They would study how a primitive species with a 2.1 rating defeated an enemy that the most advanced. Civilizations couldn't stop, and they would learn the most important lesson in galactic military history. Sometimes the best weapon isn't the most advanced technology or the most sophisticated strategy. Sometimes the best weapon is the refusal to accept that something can't be done. The humans had taught the galaxy that power couldn't always be quantified. Some things were too wild, too creative, too stubbornly human to fit into any equation. And that was exactly what made them so dangerous.